Hello? Hello? Sir, can you hear? Can you hear, sir? Hello? Hello?
Everybody, today we start off with our discussion on importance of data analytics in the healthcare domain. Now healthcare is a domain which is very upcoming in a sense that it is having a lot of data in different kinds of aspects. Now one aspect is the data in the hospitals. Now every hospital nowadays have their electronic systems and all the patient information, their demographics, those things are getting captured in the system, and they try to analyze the incidence of a particular disease, whether it's varying across some kind of demographic, and also a lot of studies are happening in terms of which we call as epidemiological studies, where basically they're trying to look at the incidence of disease in different kinds of age group, in different kind of socioeconomic background, in different kinds of say occupations, income brackets, some things are more common in males or females. So this kind of work is being happening a lot across the healthcare domain now. So, and that also brings in a lot of marketing strategies are getting defined basis on them, because if they are saying that a particular disease is very common to a certain group of people, then some kind of focus marketing activities are happening in those particular domains, in those particular demographics, in those particular regions also. So this is one aspect of the data which is getting done in the healthcare domain. Now, second kind of analysis which is being done and very widely done across is the clinical trials. So basically, when any new kind of drugs are getting developed, the companies, they are see, earlier what used to happen is was mostly it was the molecular or the concentration of the drugs were good enough to say whether the drug is effective. It's everything which is governed by government and the other regulatory agencies, that they actually need to try them out on human patients, okay, and then understand the implication of these drugs, whether they are having any kind of effect, or in terms of the curability of the purpose for which the drugs is developed, or having any kind of other side effects which was earlier not thought of, and then probably if those are coming up, then they're actually doing some kind of fine tuning of the drugs, and then finally the drugs come into the market. So even before the drug come into the market, they are getting analyzed on different groups of people across geographies to understand how they are being used in the industry and stuff like that. So today I will focus on a similar kind of data, and I'll show you some utility of analytics in how they can give us good insights on the utility of this kind of drugs. Now, statistic data are generally of two types, which we call, one is the categorical data. For example, an example of that can be the gender, the age group, the incidence of a particular side effect, is 0-1 kind of scenario. Or it can be continuous in a sense that it is some kind of blood pressure which is getting measured, some kind of other parameters like the lipid profiles, the blood pressures, the heart rates, or other kind of, say, liver enzymes. So these kind of things getting measured, and we would like to see the implication or how they are varying across the other parameters. Say for example, a person who has a high BMI, is the person's heart rate or the blood pressures are also high, or people who are smokers, do they have, among smokers is there higher incidence of heart attack or not. So these kind of analysis is very common across the healthcare industry. Now the data which I have today is, I have got the file. Now 4 groups, when the statistics studies using, but the people administered them. So they administering the drug, they also don't have a clue on which drug they are administering. Only after the results are carried out and results are published, then they come to know, okay, this is the drug they were using. So it's called double-blind studies, and patients are chosen randomly that which patient will come up and be used on which particular drug will be that particular patient. Therefore, drugs group 1, 2, and are primarily used anesthesia. To operate as part of the anesthesia, these drugs are used, and we would like to study the impact of these drugs on the different parameters. Blood pressure, blood DBP is the diastolic blood pressure, then heart rate is there, and then there are other parameters like the oxygen concentration, which is called SpO2, or the carbon emission, which is called EtCO2. On the paper, their demographics are looked into, and we try to see whether the groups essentially are similar. For example, a group has a portion of people in the higher age bracket, then probably the age factor only respond to a drug differently as compared to patients of a lower age bracket. So essentially we need to ensure that the patients have a similar kind of demographic structure or preoperative feature before we actually go and check their drug during the operation or the after and look into other side effects. So suppose I have this age as a variable. So if I want to look at the age across the different age groups, so first we look into the age across different groups. So if I want at that, I look at prox parameters into are the mean and the standard deviation. Okay, so mean and deviation. Now which variables we want to look at? We want to look at different variables, say A. To look at all variables, we can simply not mention any which we are looking at. About Excel, we can use the OD commands in SAS, can convert the out into an Excel. Height. Parameters, or maybe the so for each age I get to see their some test, as I told you, can be types. Now for this how analysis can be of different types. Suppose I have a variable which is say V1 and another variable which is V2. Now if both of them are of categorical nature, we have not much of analysis to do from the chi-square test. Now chi-square test, what it does is it tries to check whether the two variables independently distribute or not. The other is categorical. We look at how the category, if they have only two categories, then we look at the unpaired test. Whereas if we have more than two, we look into the ANOVA test. Now, since this group has more than two categories, the four categories here, we should understand the difference values is first is proc means is generally proc gives us the parameters whatever we see. See, if I here I want deviation, hence a deviation. Specified the variable for which I want to generate. I specified the variables. If I didn't specify the variables, I would have all variables. Okay. Now here also specified some of the others. We would have got, say, for example, if you want the median or the other things, I can specify them as part of this statement. Now, in order to understand whether they are significant or not, the difference to something called a proc ANOVA. So it means that model age equal to genes that trying to raise the hypothesis whether mean age same across every of gene variable. This class statement ensuring that it's a categorical variable. So group that there is significant difference groups. Similarly, the height, look at the p-value with conclusion. See, most alpha level we take at 5. If p-value is less than the alpha level, we reject the hypothesis. If the p-value is more than the alpha level, we accept the hypothesis. If I look at the p-value here is 0.6616, which is more than 0.05, our prescribed alpha level, we get the mean weight is not significantly varying across the drug groups. Similarly, for the other parameters, the SB, also I get significant variation in heart rate. We have shown parameters. I want okay, some drug group is in stabilizing patient during the type Now if I look here for different these kind of variables, now I see that there is a very significant difference in heart rate after 5 minutes across the groups. Now just by saying significant will answer my query. I need to know why which group had the high values, which group low values. So I need to also whenever I reason for the specific difference. So I need to parallelly get. So if I look at the now, what is called difference? Group 3 and 4, which are very simple. 1. 2, which is contributing very heavily on that significance. So group 2, now there are two outputs. One is the output of the ANOVA test, which tells me whether something is significant or not. Here I see, okay, heart rate across 5 minutes significantly different as the 4 groups, because the hypothesis for the test is that the group means are same. Now, which I am rejecting heavily because my p-value is extremely small. Now, the reason for that difference is coming out from this. So, if I look into this, I see that group 2 has a very significant lower heart rate as compared to the other groups. Same thing for the other heart rates also. Whereas if I look into the blood pressure, it's again the same thing. The group 2 has a significantly lower amount of blood pressure as compared to the other 3 groups. So group 2 has not been able to keep the patient in the stabilized state. So if you look into this, group 1, group 3 and group 4 probably have been able to keep the patient in the stabilized state, but group 3 has not been able to keep them in this, group 2 has not been able to keep them in the stabilized state. Now, if I wanted to exclude group 2 and see whether the difference is still significant or not, that also we could have done. Suppose now we see that group 2 is very different from the other groups, but if I exclude that particular group, is the difference still significant? So I exclude group, so I want to do the analysis, but when group is not equal to 2, that means I am excluding the group 2. So what I am ending up is getting only 3 groups now we are analyzing, group 1, 2 and 3. So if I go back and check the outcome, say I am analyzing now only groups 1, 3 and 4. And now if I look at the p-values, they are not significant. That means it's actually the group 2 which was causing that significant amount of difference or significant amount of variation in the mean levels. Whereas if I exclude that particular group, there is not much significant difference across the 3 groups. So it's actually the group 2 which is a bit different from the other 3 groups. And the cause for the difference we have already identified by looking at the summary statistics. So if I look at the mean levels, we have seen that group 2 is actually causing a lot of variation in the these vital parameters during the operation period as compared to the other 3 groups, right? Now, there is one kind of analysis. Similarly, we could have looked into the post-operative things and they're giving us some kind of side effects. So if I look into this, there is a variable called NV, which is saying me nausea or vomiting, whether the person is getting nausea or not. And here we have a case where we have both of them are categorical in nature. So when both of them are categorical in nature, we look at the chi-square test. Now how do I do that? Now, here in the table statement, whatever we specify first comes as the row, whatever we specify next comes as the column. Just let me run the basic output for you before the chi-square test to show you what exactly is the outcome. Then we can also carry out the test simultaneously. Now, if you look at this, the groups have come up in the columns, and the nausea vomiting, a person experiencing nausea vomiting and not experiencing that, have come up in the row. Now each cell has 4 values. Now what are these 4 values? The first one is the frequency. So there are 22 individuals in group 2 who are experiencing nausea vomiting, who are not experiencing nausea vomiting, while 8 patients are experiencing that particular phenomenon. Second is the percentage. What is this 22 out of the total? That is 120. So 22 out of 120 is 18.33. That's the percentage. Row percentage is percentage along the row. So there are 105 individuals in this data who have not experienced nausea vomiting. 22 out of them belong to group 2, which is 20.95%. So this is my row percentage. Finally, the column percentage. Out of 30 individuals in group 2, 22 have not experienced nausea vomiting, which is 73.33%. So whatever values you want to look at, you can look at, but if you want to suppress some of these informations, you can also do that. So if I want to suppress some of these informations, we do. Suppose I don't want the overall percent, so I suppress that. Suppose I don't want the row percent, I suppress that. So end up getting the frequency and the column percentage. So this is a more compact output. Now suppose at the same time I want to look at the chi-square test. So I give him the option that I want to look at the chi-square test. Here the hypothesis is that they are independently distributed. That means the incidence of nausea Pearson's chi-square test, it tests the hypothesis that the variation is remaining constant across the groups. So if I'm looking at this, so if I look at these two, can I say whether it's constant across the group or not? I can't say, because unless and until I do the test, I cannot comment anything on the significance of that. So if I do this test now, with this I'm getting this this p-value is lower than, mostly we look into the first one, the Pearson's chi-square test. There is significant difference because this p-value is lower than 0.05, my specified alpha level or my thought of alpha level. Since this p-value is lower than my alpha level, I reject the hypothesis to claim that there is a significant variation in the incidence of nausea vomiting across the group. Not only that, if I look into these percentages, I can see that group 2 is experiencing more nausea vomiting as compared to the other three groups. Here also, if I had excluded the second group, probably I would have got an insignificant p-value. So it's basically the drug group 2 which was not stabilizing my patients. Here my p-value is 0.3381. So it is more than my alpha level. So it's the now we are getting a very clear-cut indication on the drugs that the drug group 2 was not keeping the patient stabilized or was showing a lot of variation in the vital parameters during the operation. Also, in spite of them having a similar patient profile at the onset. So in spite of having, so 4 drugs were at the onset when we checked, they were having similar kind of patient profiles. The age, weight, the baseline parameters, they were similar. However, during the operation, drug group 2 had shown quite a huge, large amount of variation in the blood pressures, heart rates during the operation as compared to the other groups. And they also have higher incidence of nausea vomiting as compared to the other groups. So not only the drug group is not keeping the vital parameters of the patient stable during the operation, but post-operative period they are having higher amount of side effects. So probably this group should be avoided while treating the patients. Now the third kind of analysis which we can also look at for a similar data is whether there is change from the baseline level. Now here we have basically looked into the variation across group for each time point. Now we would also like to look at whether there is a difference from the baseline level. Now that is being done by something called a pair T test. Now pair T test is basically done when we are trying to look at for a same observation, what we are trying to compare means of two variables. Now ideally the variables should related in some way. If they are not, we can compare mean of height with mean of weight, but that hardly makes a sense. But if I compare mean height before having and after having complan, then that can probably give us an indication that whether complan effective in increasing the height of a person or not. Or say weight before diet regime, weight after diet regime. So understand, a group of people in VSS have been interviewed. Prior to that their weight was what, after that their weight was that, then we understand the implication of the regime that they were going through, so that was it effective in reducing the weight well or not. So that's another analysis which can be done. Very similarly we can also do something here also. The baseline parameters, so AP, DBP, MAP, heart rate, we have the baseline parameters, and we also have there. Suppose I want to look at the variation in heart rate or say blood pressure from baseline level. So if I want to look at, suppose I want to look at the heart rate at the or the SBP at the SB at the 5 minute after 5 minute interval.